This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, March the 6th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, and David Williams. He's produced the program. You'll be speaking with David when you pick up the phone and give us a shout in the queue and on the air. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. Well, I have to admit, I don't pay very close attention to the weather forecast unless I got a game of golf scheduled or going skiing or have to travel the highway. And yesterday talked about the fact that days are getting longer and brighter and the snow is melting. And then ran into one of the boys yesterday, says, "Are you ready for the 60 centimeters?" I'm like, what? So apparently what has melted will be replaced. No firm forecast regarding the accumulation amounts at this point, but I guess there's a bit of weather coming. C'est la vie, 'tis March in Newfoundland and Labrador. All right, let's go to check in first. Let's go to Labrador. There's a great video kicking around out there on the heels of the Special Olympics that were out in Calgary last week. So this Labrador athlete, Colin Rumbold, a hero's welcome when he returned home with his 2 gold, 1 bronze medal at the Special Olympic Canada Games in Calgary. So congratulations. See if you can find that video after the show. And let's go to Regina. Check in on the Briar. Way to go, Team Andrew Simmons, Team NL. They got off the schneid yesterday. They beat Yukon 6-5, up 5-2 in the 10th, gave up a steal of 3, had to go to the extra end, but they pulled it off with a 6-5 victory. They're back on the ice against Manitoba 4:30 this afternoon, but the big one. So Team Gushue, Team Canada, they beat Nunavut yesterday 8-3. They're 4-2 in the overall standings, but they're behind PEI. They're out of a playoff spot at this moment in time. So today at 11:30 this morning is the who shall. Gushue and Team Canada versus PEI. That will determine which one of those sides is likely to advance to the playoffs. But go get them, Gushue and boys. Boy, oh boy. All right, speaking of bouncing around, interesting one. And this used to stress me out a little bit when my kids, like most kids, love getting on the trampoline for a bounce. Now, there's been lots of reports of injuries as a result of the trampoline activity. The patent was achieved today, 1945. George Nissen of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, received the patent for the first modern trampoline, and in the world of boxing on this date in 1964. Legend Cassius Clay joined the Nation of Islam, changed his name to Muhammad Ali, saying that he had dropped his former title, which he referred to as his slave name, Muhammad Ali. All right. I got an email overnight about an issue that happened on a school bus. So we know there's going to be the opportunity for rambunctious youngsters. Some might be saucy, some are up and walking around when they shouldn't be, and there was an incident on the bus. So it brings forth certain questions that have been long in play. Now, it's good that the province removed the arbitrary 1.6 kilometres away from school rule, so everyone's getting a bus ride if they do indeed need. And the driver, their job is to drive the bus, to be looking forward, as opposed to having to monitor the children themselves. So the question being asked by this emailer, I'm pretty sure it was their child on the receiving end of a SWAT, is, do we need a monitor on the bus? I don't know. Do we need cameras on the bus so that we can go to the tape to evaluate who did what when? But school bus safety is, of course, paramount. We've already had a problem, long-running problem in the province, with how we evaluate school bus contracts. But it was an interesting email to read because just after reading that email, I opened up a story come from Ontario, Woodstock, Ontario in particular, where a bus driver has been charged with careless driving causing bodily harm. So the bus tipped over. There was a bunch of children that were hurt. One had to be evacuated by air ambulance. But the question being posed by the mother of one of the children who was hurt, I think broke his elbow, is should there be a seatbelt on the bus? It's been long a concern. The problem is, at some point in the 70s, Transport Canada did an investigation of whether or not seatbelts would be advantageous on a bus. When you talk about some common sense approach here, of course a seatbelt would be better. They talked about the compartmentalization of a bus and how that was deemed safe and the distance between the child's head and the roof. But the problem is, the investigation showed clearly that a seatbelt would be much more safer for people riding the bus. But it's never been acted on. Some of the thought behind that is, if there were seatbelts, then we'd be unable to put 3 children per seat, so consequently need more buses, unless they had some 5-point harness for the child in the middle of a 3-person row. So I think it's a good question. Seatbelts on buses. And of course, will come with a big cost. Just the addition of that hardware itself. And yes, you need more school buses to transport the numbers of children and or anybody using the big yellow bus. But the big accident, and apparently it's the second one in short order in Ontario. So as I read, an altercation on a school bus here to be followed by a story about whether or not we should have seatbelts on buses. What do you think? Speaking of buses, this one, the ambulance variety. I hear from paramedics all the time, and we're actively trying to get an update as to where we are in the consolidation of some 60 ground ambulance contracts. Still lingering concern about the privatization of the air ambulance in full. So if that's something you want to take on, we can do it. Let's touch on privatization now in a second. So, in the world of MRIs, we've heard some pretty horrendous stories in the last few days. A lady who waited 2 years for an MRI just to find out that she's had a growing brain tumor now faces a lengthy and potentially dangerous brain surgery. And then you see a story this morning, a fellow in Mount Pearl who needs an MRI to see if his cancer has spread. He got a letter in the mail saying that his appointment is in January of 2026. So when we look at wait times in the province, there's always going to be ongoing concerns. So they're talking about expanding the hours of operations for MRI machines. They're talking about a central intake, which would be helpful. But then when we look at the referrals being made, and they get three different labels, right? Non-urgent, emergent, emergent, urgent, or non-urgent. At some point, you know what's going to happen. The clinicians, the healthcare providers, are going to label everything urgent because their patients need to be seen. So wait times apparently vary from 125 to 427 days here in the province, but these stories are becoming more and more frequent. Add to it, there's missed appointments to the tune of about 5%, which is absolutely unhelpful. So in addition to expanded hours and whatnot, talking about there will be possibly and very likely a sixth MRI machine that will be in the province. That will be out in the new Cornerbrook Hospital. Then still, you wonder what that means for the overall reduction. I heard the minister say that they're talking about adding a potential seventh machine. He's looking for guidance from NL Health Services about that possibility. But those wait times in these stories, the fella from Mount Pearl, the lady now facing a major brain surgery, and yes, for folks who have an appointment, we have to do our level best, and government has to do a better job. But giving us that 11th hour update, reminder that your appointment is coming. Because as much as we'll be cautious and we'll try to be on top of our own health, and to attend our appointments, when your appointment is in January 2026, maybe, just maybe, through the variety of complications of people's lives, that just might fall off the radar, and then they wake up one morning, oh my God, my appointment was yesterday. So there's a bunch of areas there where we have to do a bit better. And, there's all the likelihood in the world that given the gaps in the healthcare system in this country, there's going to be more and more thought about what happens if we expand private offerings. There's already private offerings inside our universal healthcare, and I understand the thought, right? So if this fellow Mount Pearl needs an MRI and he can go pay his hard-earned money for one and get out of the public queue, that would be good for him and jump everybody up one spot in the queue. Things like that make sense, right? When you stand back and think about it. But there's a couple of complicating problems. Unless we actually add more technicians for MRIs, if we add more doctors and nurses and LPNs and nurse practitioners and social workers and psychiatrists and psychologists, unless we add people, we're simply shuffling people around. Same thing when we talk about the establishment of the collaborative care clinics in this province. There's the goal to add 35 to the system. But unless the bulk of the professionals in these clinics are new to the system, then once again, we're just moving people around. There's a study, and I read the basics of it, I'm going to dig into a little further throughout the week, about privatization of healthcare. So they point to a variety of possible problems. The complexity of people's health issues will remain in the public system because the private clinic can turn them away. And this was conducted. The lead author is from the Oxford University. It was published in The Lancet, and it talks about an awful lot of the things that we need to be considering. Where did I just put that? Okay, here we go. So they looked at healthcare measures for patients before and after health service privatization. The studies included measures indicated for care quality, staffing levels, patient mix by insurance type, the number of services provided, workload for doctors, and health outcomes for patients, such as avoidable hospitalizations. Here are some of the key findings of this particular report, published in The Lancet once again. Increases in privatization generally corresponded with worse quality of care, with no studies included in the review finding unequivocally positive effects on health outcomes. Hospitals converting from public to private ownership status tended to make higher profits. This was mainly achieved by reducing staff levels and reducing the proportion of patients with limited health insurance coverage. Privatization generally corresponded with fewer cleaning staff employed per patient and higher rates of patient infections. In some studies, higher levels of hospital privatization corresponded with higher rates of avoidable deaths. However, in some cases, example Croatia, privatization led to some benefits for patient access through more precise appointments and new means of care delivery, such as out-of-hours telephone calls. So pretty much basically, they say the privatization can improve quality of healthcare through increased market competition by enabling a more flexible patient-centered approach, but no scientific proof evaluation that privatization is a good idea. Now, again, I completely understand if someone actually has the money to get out of the public queue and go get their hip replaced or their knee replaced or an MRI, but it's not to say that that might not be helpful in some small measures. The problem is, if you go too far, we may create a whip for our own tail. The studies did include countries like Canada, Croatia, England, Germany, Italy, South Korea, Sweden, and the USA. And of course, all with very differing healthcare offerings and approaches and policies and insurance coverage and what have you. So, not to say that the gentleman from Mount Pearl, if he had the money to go down Elizabeth Avenue and get an MRI tomorrow, would be beneficial to him, his anxiety, and his overall health. But where does it all end? It's just a question I think that we've got to be considering, because you know the problem and the pressures that premiers, prime ministers, federal cabinet ministers, provincial ministers, what they face when we talk about healthcare, because the system absolutely is not working as intended, and so consequently the mind would drift to what happens if we offer more private services, just to instigate or provoke a conversation. But that report from the University of Oxford researchers published in the Lancet Public Health publication is something we should be thinking about. And of course, in the privatization, the travel nurses issue, there will be accusations where you're simply playing politics. People focus in on $36 million over the course of 5 months. Tony Wakeham, the leader of the official opposition, alleging that this all began in the Premier's office. The Premier didn't really directly answer the question as to his involvement, other than to say they simply forwarded along an email to NL Health Services and he did not sign the contract. Thoughts about pet transportation and purchase of air fryers, accommodations, cab rides, meal allowances. How about this? If we really want to get down to the brass tacks, why don't we have a look at the contract? With all the to and fro and the grey areas and the pointing of fingers, we're never going to get anywhere beyond the access to information that was published initially in the Globe and Mail. Let's have a look at the contract. Won't that settle the entirety of the issue? Add to it, we need to know exactly what the plan is to backfill travel nurses that are taken out of the system, because, again, you can't simply just add without having actual additional human resources. What do you think? You want to take it on? We can do it. Stick with healthcare. This is about the National Dental Program. So the portal for those who are 70 and older opened up this month, and the care is supposed to begin in May. But still, the questions and the confusion out there is very real. About 1 million Canadians have signed up so far. So if you are low, middle income, don't have any health insurance, and have a net family income or household income of $90,000 or less, you are or could be eligible. Here's some of the confusions. So they talk about, for those who have access to private dental coverage through their work or professional organizations, they remain ineligible for the Canadian Dental Care Plan. They're ineligible even if they decide to opt out of their private insurance, haven't made a claim, or haven't had to pay a premium, so says the government's website. But now there's been an exception offered. The exemption is for retirees who decided not to sign up for private dental insurance offered through their pension plans. If they opted out of those dental plans before December the 11th of 2023 and aren't allowed to opt back in, they are now qualified for the national program. Here's the problem. With that exemption being offered on the 5th of March, nobody had that crystal ball available to know that, okay, I want to be eligible for the National Dental Care Program, so it's the 10th of December I have to opt out. Folks are also ineligible even if they're in some sort of plan where they do not have dental coverage, but it's offered inside the plan as an add-on. Even if you don't have that add-on, you're not eligible. We still don't know how many dentists and hygienists and denturists are even going to participate in the program. So offering a clarification for an exemption on the 5th of March, that is back to the 11th of December, is kind of nonsensical. That's why these massive big policy changes, whether it be in pharmacare and or dental care, there was a lot of greys and unknowns that weren't attended to before they rolled them out. And why? It's got to be simply the politics of it all. The Liberals scrambling to hold on to power to give the NDP what they're asking for, and the two big ones were dental care and pharmacare. And so the supply and confidence agreement hinged on that, and those two in particular. And unless there was going to be delivery by deadlines, then that supply and confidence agreement was going to go away and the Liberals will be ousted. But as a result, political expediency was not followed by due diligence and answering every single moving part, every single scenario, because that's important. So Canadians who thought they might get covered, consequently aren't, unbeknownst to them until it was too late. So anyway, I want to take it on. We can do it. I promised the folks at the Lymphedema Society or Association that I'd mentioned that the fact that March is indeed Lymphedema Awareness Month. So it's a chronic disease caused by a buildup of lymph fluid. Primary lymphedema occurs when a person is born with a faulty lymph system. Secondary lymphedema occurs when the lymph system is damaged by surgery, radiation treatment, or severe injury, and of course has a direct impact on the quality of life. It affects men, women, and children. 120 million people affected worldwide, over 1 million in Canada, and over 15,000 in this province. It's chronic, but it's manageable, and we think we're going to have a conversation with someone from that Lymphedema Association sometime this week. All right, another couple of quick ones. Housing. So the Task Force on Housing has released their initial report. You've heard the numbers, and they're staggering. The need to build 5.8 million new homes by 2030 to restore housing affordability. So we're talking about a really fast-growing population. Homeowners, renters, seniors, young families, students, and those who find themselves housed precariously. So there's all kinds of recommendations, 50 specific policy actions for the federal government, 50 specific policy actions for provincial governments, and 40 specific for municipal governments. We'll try to pick away at them over the days to come, but some of the key takeaways are: legalized density. We've long had a problem with urban sprawl. It comes with a distinct cost. So they're talking about legalizing density. Focusing housing growth in cities and communities where there is existing infrastructure like roads, water lines. It's faster, less costly, less carbon, and more resilient. Implement better building codes. Better building form can reduce operating costs, cut emissions, and improve resilience. This is a big one. Invest in factory-built housing. Factory-built housing and other processes and material innovations can speed up construction, reduce costs, and systemize energy-efficient and climate-resilient features. Another big one here is thinking about Port aux Basques. Don't build in high-risk areas. The most expensive home is the one you need to rebuild after an extreme weather event. So we'll pick away at some of the Fed recommendations, provincial recommendations, municipal recommendations, but the path towards construction of 5.8 million new homes by 2030, the race is on, and we are the hare, although hopefully the hare will win. We're the turtle, and hopefully we can win that one. All right, there's a lot I want to get to, but I have to mention this one. There's a big by-election in Stephenville today. You've heard all the allegations of harassment and bullying, and so 3 councillors have stepped away, so 3 vacancies. Interestingly, there's 12 people on the ballot. 12 people trying to replace 3 councillors. So the by-election is indeed today. The polling booths will be open at St. Stephen's Parish Centre on West Street from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Full list of the candidates, you can find it on the Town of Stephenville's website. But 12 to replace 3, that'll be an interesting race to find out. And the state funeral details for the late Right Honourable Brian Mulroney have been set. It's going to be held, on March the 23rd in Montreal. Of course, he died February 29th in Palm Beach home. He's 84 years of age, the country's 18th Prime Minister. There will be public tributes in Montreal where he lies repose. That term was used when a former Prime Minister or Governor General's casket lies anywhere than other on the Hill. There will be public opportunity to pay respects to Mulroney in Ottawa when he lies in state in Parliament Hill, but the state funeral in Montreal on the 23rd of March. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Our email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. That means you're in the queue to talk about whatever's on your mind. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's begin this morning on line number 3 and say good morning to one of the finest athletes the province has ever produced from St. Mary's Bay, 3-time Paralympian in the 76, 80 and 84 games. She's a member of the Wheelchair Basketball Canada Hall of Fame, disability advocate, recipient of the Order of Canada. This is Joanne McDonald joining us on 3. And good morning, Joanne. You're on the air.
You're making me blush, Paddy.
That was pretty good.
Oh, nice to chat with you. I'm calling today about an organization I'm involved with called the History of Disability Rights Newfoundland and Labrador. And we're having a launch today at the Queen Elizabeth Library at Memorial University. And the launch is essentially around the collection of videos that we have created over the past couple of years. And essentially, it's an interview with 13 disability activists. And, they're being housed at Memorial University. And we want everybody to come in and have a look at our trailer, talk with some of the activists, and get to learn a little bit about the project.
I read the story in Mund's Gazette, and there's a quote from you that says there was a significant lack of information on the history of disability in the province. Given that fact, why was it important? What do you think the result will be with compiling the history of the disability community in the province?
Well, we have the people who we interviewed are 13 individuals who are on the front line, basically advocating on behalf of individuals with disabilities in so many different areas. And they've been doing that for 30, 35, 40 years in some cases. And we wanted to capture the stories. We wanted to capture their history of their involvement with the issues, what kinds of things they were struggling with, what were the barriers that they were addressing at the time. And we wanted to capture those stories, Patty, because we didn't want that history to be lost. We didn't want it to be rewritten, and also for community at large to see what was happening in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in terms of disability. Where was the legislation? What was the policies like? What were the programs and services? So we wanted to paint a picture, if you will, of what was happening then, and people will get a good sense of where we are today. And, I did actually a little bit of research quite some time ago and was very disappointed to see literally no information with respect to our history in this province. I went actually to one place and saw a folder with all kinds of black and white photos of individuals with disabilities. But there was no context in terms of what it was about, what the event was, who was there, what year it was. There was nothing at all. And that sort of spurred my friend Mary Reid and I on to say, let's take this a little bit further. Let's see what we can do. And we started creating, getting documents, looking at history, and then we had an idea that maybe what we really needed to do was talk to the people who were on the front line at the time and get their stories.
When the stories were told and this has been produced, characterize the picture that was painted. Was it grim or troubling, or how would you label it?
I would say that it wasn't until actually the mid-60s that we really started to see some things happening around disability with respect to programs and services and legislation. The 70s and 80s, Patty, were just amazing in terms of the kind of work that community organizations were doing and the progress that was being made. New legislation was coming in, organizations being established, the language was changing from something very archaic to something much more respectful to the individuals. So prior to 1960s, I think it was very bleak. There was very little happening in terms of programs and services and legislations. Either people were being sent away for education or they were being institutionalized. And so there's been a tremendous amount of progress, Patty, absolutely. So we saw that in the 70s and 80s and parts of the 90s. Late 90s and the 2000s, we see a real slippage in terms of programs and services and policies, just subtle changes, and all of a sudden things that we were used to are now sort of eroding a little bit. And what I mean by that is, for example, young people sometimes that incur a spinal cord injury go through a rehab process. And in the 70s and 80s, they were basically taught to live independently within their communities. And today what we have is individuals oftentimes sadly are going into long-term care facilities. So a dramatic shift in approach to it.
It's And we're also talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% of the population. So this is a massive issue that I don't think, unless you have a disability yourself or someone in your family or a friend has one, you probably don't notice where some of the gaps are. So what's your message to folks who are not in the disability community? Because I can talk about universal design, whether it be for accessibility and to a lower cost, because when we renovate, it's worse than if we just do the right thing at the beginning. So what's the message to folks when they look around to see where the gaps would be and the hurdles that you and others face?
I think the big one for me, Paddy, is that sometimes people look at an establishment and see a ramp and an automatic door opener and think, oh, okay, everything is accessible. But the diversity within the disability community, the different disabilities and the complexities sometimes, we haven't achieved accessibility in this province. We are, in some cases, much more advanced, I think, in some areas, but we have a way to go. And I guess if I were to advise a community who are outside of the disability community to talk with organizations, to talk to individuals with disabilities, to find out what it's like in terms of accessing, in terms of finding housing or getting an education, or what kinds of supports are there. I think that would be my big advice. The other thing I think would be to go and have a look at the videos, hear the stories of people who have lived experience, who have gone through the process of trying to create change in our province, and hear their stories.
Fair enough. What does Mary Reid do these days? I know that she was formerly at the Independent Living Resource Centre, right? Yes,
she was, and then she was involved with the Disability Policy Office within the provincial government for a period of time, and now she's co-chair of Accessibility Standards Canada. Very busy woman. I tell her she doesn't do very much, but I don't get very far with that.
Well, if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person, as they say.
Absolutely, Teddy.
So the launch is today?
The launch is today at 1 o'clock at the Queen Elizabeth Library on the 3rd floor, and we'd love to see anybody who can come out and have a chat and view our trailer and, take part in it.
I appreciate making time for the show this morning, Joanne.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paddy. Have a good day.
The same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, there you go. So the headline inside the story in the Gazette is the campaign of remembering history of disability rights NL. The project, of course, aims to improve policies. Let's take a break right on time. When we come back, Nelson Pittman's in the queue to talk about a washout. Mayor Mike Tiller out looking for the Liberal nomination, of course, on Fogo Cape Friels. Wants to talk about fire and emergency services, and then whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Nelson, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Morning.
Paddy, is the Nelson Pittman calling from Sops Arm, White Bay. I suppose you know where it's to.
Sure.
Anyhow, it's in the district of the Premier. But anyhow, it's right in a place called Old House Cove is where I live too. Old OLDHOUSC Cove. Anyhow, there last Thursday we had temperatures that went up to plus 10 degrees, and we had a good bit of snow on the ground that time. And naturally, when it started to melt, water started to run. And because the ditches are not ditched, there hasn't been any ditching done on the highway here in Old House Cove since the road was paved probably 30 years ago. And there hasn't been any ditching done, and that is the problem. That there's no ditching. Because this ditch was filled up with ground, there was no place for the water. When the snow started to run, to melt, there was no place for the water to go but across the road and down across my driveway. And on Friday morning, there was a trench across my driveway about 1 foot wide and 1 foot deep. And I was supposed to go to Deer Lake for a medical appointment, and I had to get out in the morning. I called, reported that night when I went out, the river was running down my driveway. I called Deer Lake and reported on the answer machine. Anyhow, and no answer, and nobody called, and nobody showed up or nothing. So anyhow, I got up next morning before daylight, and I went out and I shoveled the snow, and I managed to get up over the hill and get to Deer Lake. And I've been doing that ever since, shovel the snow, because you can't, when the ground froze, you can't get any ground to put into it with a shovel. Anyhow, I called this morning, and because it was mild today, and I said, well, maybe they can come down and with the backhoe and repair it today. And I just called, and they said, no, there's nobody coming today because they have to go to Owley to put some coal patch into potholes in Owley. Now imagine a small community in Sops Arm, and Owley's about 120 kilometres, a little more than 100 kilometres from here. They had to take the group out of this area to carry in there to do coal patch. And I guess my driveway wasn't, and the ditching wasn't important. Because if we get more mild weather and more snow melt, I'm going to get more water to come down across my driveway, and the ditch is going to get bigger. And anyhow, they said they may come tomorrow morning, but tonight temperatures are going to drop again tonight, and it's going to freeze. And I got my doubts whether they're going to be able to do very much with it tomorrow. Anyhow, they said they're going to do it, but I'm not holding this against the workers there. I think the workers are worked to death. You know, I mean, probably are. I don't know. Probably there's something like I don't know if they're worked to death or not, but anyhow, it seems like the planning is poor. You know, I mean, I guess my driveway wasn't priority. But anyhow, also, my driveway probably is not the priority. The priority here is the roads there, and the roads here are atrocious. The worst roads, I'd say, anywhere in Newfoundland. The school bus, in order the school bus to drive the road, they got a school bus coming in here, and in order the school bus to drive that road to stay upright, it got to stay on the wrong side of the road, because the road is tipping about 30 degrees on the side, on one way. On one side of the road is tipping down, where the road is starting to give away on one side. And the ditches, there's after every rainfall, there's nothing but water flowing across the road in numerous places. It's ridiculous. And the pavement is there's only about 1/3 of the pavement left of the pavement they put there. There's places that is all coming up and rolled up and everyhow. It's dangerous. Anybody I loved, I wouldn't send over the road. I guess I wouldn't send them over the road if I had felt anything for them. You know, I mean, you pretty well need a 4-wheel drive or a ATV now to drive safely on this road.
And you talk about the workers and how busy they may be. And, of course, they can only do something like ditching if they're given direction from their supervisors or managers or the department. So it's just sort of a strange set of circumstances where, you know, we talk in other parts of the province about putting in the appropriate size culvert. You don't have to worry about that because there's not even a ditch.
Right on, Paddy. Right on. The ditch is there now. The ditch that's there now would be big enough, but there's no water getting to the ditch. The water can't get to the ditch and run through because the ditch is plugged up about 100 feet away from the culvert, you know, so from the pipe. From the culvert, the ditch is plugged up. It hasn't been dug out, and that's a lot of places right here. A lot of places like that where water is going across the road is not because the culvert's not big enough. It's because the water can't get to the culverts. If the water got to the culverts when it started raining, it would keep raining and the water level wouldn't build up in the ditches. You're right on there, Paddy, and it's because of the neglect over years, and like I said, it's not the workers in the area, it's coming right from the top. It's right from the top down, you know, I don't know, and I think that the premier, I consider the premier the captain of the ship, and the captain of the ship is not looking after the workers under them, you know. And I tell you what, right now, if I got to get a private excavator or a private backhoe to come here and repair and dig out that ditch, which I might do, I might get a private backhoe to come and do work that the highway's supposed to do, to dig that ditch. Maybe there's about 200 feet of ditch got to be dug out. I may, if they don't come and do it properly, I will hire a backhoe or an excavator to come and do it, and I will get CBC and NTV to come and observe it being done and show that they got to get some local people got to take it in their own hands to go do work that the government's supposed to be doing.
Nelson, when people in smaller, rural, isolated communities have their concerns with roadway and or any other types of services, immediately people will think, well, how many people live there and can we afford to invest in ditches and culverts and road work? You know that full well as much as I do, that people think like that. So what do you say to folks who say, well, my God, you know, we can't be spending millions of dollars to go ahead and have access roads and culverts and ditching done for, you know, half a dozen people living in one small community. What do you say to that?
That is right. You're right, Patty. That is the mentality. I agree, and I think that's the way it is. That's the way it looks like. That's the way people think. Because there's not enough people there anymore. Like you said, there's in this district right here now where I live right now, there's only 2 children, but there's still those 2 children are just as important as 50 children. The school bus still got to go out this road to carry 2 children, you know, and in order for the school bus to do it safely, because the road condition half the time it got to be on the wrong side of the road. I mean, and that's not safe. A school bus got to be driving on the wrong side of the road most of the time to get from A to B. And I'll tell you another thing, like I said, you know, this area here, in its summertime, is one of the biggest tourist areas in the area. And another thing, there's a lot of revenue being generated from this area because, number one is the Cat Iron project. The Cat Iron project is a big project. It provides a lot of electricity for Newfoundland. And right now, last year, they paved the road. The government looks after the road. They looks after the road from the junction, Hampton Junction, down to Cat Iron. They just paved a good section of that because that's a section where people, high-profile people from Hydro, got to drive over. They don't want to be driving over a road like this we got down here. They want a road that's very safe to drive on. But meantime, you can send a school bus with children on board down a road that Hydro people would never probably drive over. They never had to go over it.
I appreciate the time and the concern this morning, Nelson. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Paddy. And like I said, if I don't see somebody to come here and do this repair properly, I will be hiring somebody come to do it. But I'm guarantee you, there'll be in TV and then CBC will be there, and then the Premier will certainly know that it's in his districts, and the private people got to pay work to do that. He should be getting the highways to do.
Appreciate the time, sir. Stay in touch.
Thank you very much, Paddy.
You're welcome, Nelson. Bye-bye. All right, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 2. Taking more to the Mayor of New West Valley. That's Mayor Mike Tiller. Is also seeking the Liberal nomination in Fogo Cape Friels. Good morning, Mayor Tiller. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you?
That's kind. Before we move along, when is the nomination going to be concluded, the nomination race?
The nomination vote is going to be on Saturday, this upcoming Saturday. It is from 12 to 5. And the polling stations have been announced, not the exact buildings, but there's going to be held in the communities of Dover, New West Valley, Musgrave Harbour, Gander Bay North, Change Islands, and Fogo Island.
And when you mentioned Dover there, of course, another person seeking the Liberal nomination would be the Mayor of Dover, Tony Keats. Is there anyone else actively pursuing this?
The former constituency assistant, Dana Blackmore.
Okay. I appreciate the time. So what's the topic for conversation this morning?
Paddy, we had our fire chief had an email come yesterday from Fire and Emergency Services saying that by December the 16th to the 24th, any fire departments that are using the Honeywell brand of SCBA, that they will no longer be considered adequate for firefighter duties. According to that email, 44% of the fire departments on the island are using Survive Air, and of course, from my travels, they're usually the smaller departments. They're an older type of SCBA, and we don't have the funds to keep replacing them with the newer models. Our department has 6 of these Honeywell SCBAs, and we had approximately 18 tanks. So we got a quote come yesterday, and to replace our 6 SCBAs and our tanks is $98,000. Our entire budget for the year is a little over 100. Now, FES has moved the application process ahead to mid-April so that more departments can get in and apply to get these replaced. But I guess what I want to get out there is that the normal amount of money that's put into these special assistance grants, I don't think is going to be able to cover what is needed to replace all these SCBAs. I mean, if 6 and 18 tanks are $98,000 for one department, I would be safe to say that you're looking at a 7-figure amount to replace all of them. And then this is not something that you can say, well, we can really do without it, because when you get in a situation, even if it's a car fire on the highway and you're not actually going into a building to fight a fire, that you're going to need that on in order to protect yourself from all the harmful chemicals. So it is a vital piece of equipment, and I just want to get it out there to any departments that are using these SCBAs that have not got this information to, go ahead, get your application process in, and to FES and to the Department of Fire and Emergency Services and Minister Hogan that, this is not going to be your normal special assistant request. This is going to take some money, and it's something that they're going to have to put in as an actual item line, I guess, in the upcoming budget to make sure that these SCBAs are replaced adequately. So just for folks, I'm not even sure if I know, but the SCBA is a self-contained breathing apparatus? It is, Patty. I should have described that more. It is the pack. When you look at any firefighters when they're going in, they have the tanks on their back, they have the mask, and it is a way for us to protect ourselves from the harmful chemicals and be able to do our jobs properly. I know that when you're watching all these fancy shows like Chicago Fire, you're seeing them putting them on and running into the houses. A lot of these small departments are not offensive where they can go in. But when you're standing outside of a burning structure and you're trying to keep it from spreading to an adjacent structure, I mean, you can't be very close to that or in any vicinity of smoke unless you got one of these SCBAs on, or you're going to risk yourself, the harmful chemicals and the cancers that come with it, and that's certainly something that we want to avoid for everybody.
100%. I appreciate the time this morning, Mike, or Mayor Tiller, pardon me.
No problem, Mike. It's fine with me, sir.
Good luck in the race.
Thank you very much, Paddy. We'll be in touch, whatever happens.
Sounds good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mayor Mike Tiller out in New West Valley. Very quickly, so yesterday when Facebook and Instagram went down, of course not of importance to many of you listening this morning, but there's a ton of listeners who send me messages on Facebook Messenger, the private messaging system. After Facebook was restored, my account, my direct messages are gone. And I can't even see anything anymore. It's just a black screen. So if you're someone who has generally in the past sent me messages via private message on Facebook, I can't see them. So you're going to have to find another way, whether it be on Twitter or send me an email. But as of now, and I'm waiting to see if it'll change, but my Facebook private messaging is gone. Let's take a break. When we come back, Tony Doyle, who's the VP Inshore with the FFAW, wants to talk about the recreational food fishery. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. Take you more to the VP Inshore at the FFAW. That's Tony Doyle. Tony, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Morning to you.
How are you this morning?
Very well, thanks for asking. How about you?
Good. I just, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the recreational fishery and the fact that they're looking to double today's fishing. Anyway, after a while, I was looking through DFO's website, and I came up on some information that I'm sure a lot of people don't realise, that most people, I hear it a lot, that people say, well, it's a God-given right to catch codfish, right, to go out and catch a codfish. So on the website, in the 23-24 management plan, when you start off reading it right away, it says that the minister, any license to fish ground fish any species, is a privilege. So I've been fishing over 50 years, and it's still a privilege for me to fish, and she can decide at any time to take that license, and then I can't fish. So it's not a God-given right. That's, in my opinion, that's one thing. The other thing that I noticed there, and looking down through, is that a number of years back, the Canadian government, DFO, signed on to an international agreement that they would help to patrol and put a stop to IUU fisheries. Now, an IUU fisheries, for those who are not familiar with that, is an illegal, unregulated, unreported fishery. Illegal, unregulated, unreported. So when you look at what's going on with the recreation fishery, as commercial fishermen, when I get my license, I got to print off the regulations from at my own expense with the printer. You print off, and some of those regulations are 10 or 12 pages for all the different fisheries. I also have logbooks for all the different fisheries that I have to send in to DFO that helps them with the management issues. And here we are with a recreational fishery taking place in Canadian waters that is unregulated, unrecorded, and by Canadian, by DFO standards, is an illegal fishery.
You're not, so there's one side is saying let's expand it to 90 days and fish whenever you like, versus what you're saying. Are you suggesting, Tony, that your read of the definition means that the recreational food fishery should be outlawed?
No. What I'm saying is it should be, the DFO needs to put something in place so that they know how many people fish and how much fish comes out of the water, and regulations on how much fish people can take. And I'm not talking about taking away the recreation fishery or taking away the right for people to get food for the winter. That's not what I'm talking about.
So
what I've been saying for at least 5 years now to DFO officials when I get an opportunity to meet with them is that they need to regulate this fishery the resource was in the critical zone for a number of years. It's now, when they rejigged the numbers, reassessed it, it's in the cautious zone. But we have a commercial fishermen who have to get fish monitored, get it recorded, do the logbooks, all of that stuff, so that DFO knows how much is coming out of the water. But right next door is a recreation fishery with it's wide open. The rules that they have around it is policy. It's not regulations. It's policy. So if I want to abide by the policy, the 5 fish a day, fine. But if I don't, well, or anyone who don't, well, then they take what fish they want. DFO don't have the bodies to patrol and regulate this fishery. So they need, by their own laws, by their own rules and regulations, by their own standards, this fishery should be regulated.
What do you?
I'm saying.
Okay, what do you envision that regulation looking like? Because you're right to say there aren't the bodies currently employed by DFO to be everywhere where people are landing recreational food fishery. Because you could be launching your boat from a wharf that has no commercial enterprises associated with it. So, how do you envision the regulation?
Well, back in the 90s, they had a system where you go to the post office and get a permit, and you could catch a number of fish. Well, I was told by an official that was in the department at that time that the first time that happened, the first year, there was only on for a couple of years, but the first year there was 90,000 people picked up a permit, and the next year there was 34,000. But the point is that they knew how many people was taking part. And now they don't know how many people is taking part in the fishery in Newfoundland, in the recreational fishery. They don't know how many fish is coming out of the water, how many tons. And yet we're still in a rebuilding plan with the cod. It's in the cautious zone by 16%. And last year, there was 39 days fishing for the recreation, and commercial fishermen had 35 days. The quota was 12,990 ton, and in 4 to 5 weeks, commercial fishermen caught all that. So now DFO is asking the question: what would, if it went to a commercial fishery, who should have access? And I was at that meeting, and it amazed me that they were even asked the question, because as commercial fishermen here in Newfoundland, we don't have enough fish to even make a living. We don't have enough fish for 6, 8, or 10, or 20 weeks. The fish, I mean, how can a fisherman make a living out of 5 weeks fishing with £4,000 a week? It's just not economical. People are doing it because they have to. The price of crab is down. Other fisheries last year got delayed. The Capelin fishery, turbot fishery didn't get pursued by fishermen who wanted to because of the delay in crab, and the reason that was delayed was the lower price. And then everyone fished the cod, and we need the cod. That's what I made my living at in the 70s and the 80s. That's all I did. I never had nothing else to make live. I fished every day. And now I get 35 days to fish, and somebody who's retired, never fished in their life, got 39 days. Does that seem right? That's the question I asked.
Fair enough. And I mean, even the boys going at the cod last year, some people had a problem landing and selling it because the plants were up to their neck in crab.
That's right, and we're hoping and praying that won't happen this year. We're hoping that we can get everything settled up and people can start fishing the 1st of April, as we always did. But whether that happens or not, time will tell. But when it comes to the cod, right now, it's in the cautious zone. And we got the recreation looking to double their days up to 90 days. And we got the offshore groups and offshore draggers, those big draggers, They want in right away. They want to get out on the Grand Banks now during the winter when the fish is spawn and clean her up. And like I told the DFO officials when I was at the meeting, if you want this fishery to go back into the critical zone quickly, put the offshore draggers out on the banks. And one lady there proposed that to have a sustainable fishery, we need a year-round fishery. Well, guess what happened in the 80s when we had a year-round fishery with the draggers on the banks and fishermen fishing inshore, and cod was chased 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And where did we end up? In a moratorium for the last 30 years. And now that the cod is just coming back, and I've only got enough to make not even a half a living out of it, the draggers want to get in right away, and the guy who never fished in his life, he wants 90 days to go fishing.
Well, it's like most things. People want what they want when they want it, right? So whether or not this ever sees any forward momentum, I have no earthly idea. I know I'm in the minority with thinking if we actually knew how many people were going and how many fish were being taken in the recreational food fishery, we'd have a debate based on reality versus based on the hypotheticals, which is where we are now. And
that's right.
Tony, I got to get to the break, but before people are wondering, about, you were talking about the cod used to be in the critical zone, now in the cautious zone. DFO simply changed the way that they assess the strength of the cod stock. So they used to, inside a 2J3KL, they were going back to 1973 or 1983, but now they've gone all the way back to 1954, which has given them a broader data model, so that now says we're in the cautious zone. Just wanted to get that out there so people knew what we're talking about. I appreciate the time, Tony.
Yeah. And one point on that, Paddy, that didn't put any more fish in the water.
It did not.
That just changed the lower reference point, that's all.
Yeah, that's right. There's no more fish because they were going back to we're 54 from 83, yep. Appreciate the time, Tony. Off to the news.
All right, thanks for your time, Paddy.
Anytime. Take care.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Tony Dawes is the VP Inshore at the FFAW. It's an interesting debate that I'm more than happy to have. Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, we're going to talk about MRIs. And, Ken is a commercial fish harvester as well. Talk about a rally coming up at Confederation Building about crab prices. If they don't figure out what percentage of the market price that is afforded to the Association for Seafood Producers and for the harvesters, then I don't imagine the price is going to be strong enough to see avoidance of another tie-up. Then Miles is one of the Ward 4 candidates, Miles Russell, to talk about Rennie's River walking trail, and then whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 1. John, you're on the air.
Good morning, sir. How are you doing?
Doing okay. How about you?
Oh, not bad. Boy, just I don't move very much because of the cell phone service we got here in Mud Lake and Mud Lake area. It's really, really deplorable. I mean, Jesus, if I moved one little bit, I'd lose the signal. But this is not why I want to call. I want to call about the MRI they were talking about the last couple of days on CBC. In 2010, I had a tumor in the brain too. And I made 10 trips, if not more, from here to St. John's. I had MRIs, I had CAT scans, X-rays, whatever they could do, they done to me, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. Anyway, finally, after frustration, I was going through this for 2 years, and I was suffering. I was hurting, and I was suffering. I was sick all the time, couldn't move. Anyway, through all the jigs and reels, I got kind of frustrated, and I called the McGill University in Montreal, and I asked the doctor there, I said, there's something got to be done. I said, I'm suffering, and I mean, I'm getting MRIs, CAT scans, and everything here in Newfoundland, Labrador, and there's nothing being done. So anyway, I told him, I said, well, I'm going out there, and I said, they're going to do something for me one way or another. I got to find out what's going on. Through all jigs and reels, he couldn't do nothing. He said, but he wanted me to send him my MCP number so he could look at my results. After about an hour later, he called me back. He told me, I've got a tumor in the brain. I've got a great big tumor in the brain. And he said they couldn't see that. And I said, well, they're after giving me about 5 or 6 MRIs and everything, and nobody seemed to come with an answer for me. The only thing is, I'm thinking about MRIs. MRIs are good, but the only thing is, we need somebody in Newfoundland Labrador that can read these MRIs, because I suffered for 2 years being sick, going back and forth to St. John's. The last time I went to St. John's to see the doctor, I'm not saying his name because I wouldn't be allowed to do it. I went to St. John's, and the doctor that I was supposed to see, say, just for instance, say on July the 20th, I went there on July the 20th, and at 1:30 in the afternoon, my appointment was. I went in 1:30 in the afternoon. The gentleman, the doctor that I was supposed to see, went on holidays for 10 days. I had to stay in St. John for 10 days on my own expense. All this is my own expense now because I never had no insurance or nothing, so we had to drive up most of the time. Just to tell me, after 10 days, I went to see him. Me and my wife went to see him, and just to tell me, I got a big tumor in the brain, and words too, they can't operate. So they had to send me to Halifax to get it done. I went to Halifax on January the 22nd of 2010. The doctor there her name was Dr. Pickett. I don't mind saying her name because she's wonderful. She said, I could operate on you, words too, but she said, the only thing is I got a 2 years waiting list. And I looked at her point blank and I said, I can't wait 2 years. I'm not going to make it 2 years. So she put me on a priority list. I've got 4 months later, she got me in. I got the tumor removed. They hit my optic nerves. I see doubles now. So the thing is about the MRI, yes, you can get an MRI done, but make sure that they can read the MRI, because that's what my problem was. There was 2 years. I was 2 years suffering, but nobody could read that MRI until I sent it to the McGill University in Montreal.
Well, of course. I mean, the technician, the piece of equipment is only as good as the technician and those who are reading the results. Of course, I completely understand on that front. And, you know, what some of the reference made to privatization, what have you. It's one thing to be able to go to a private MRI clinic because that's a one-off test. Very different than, you know, privatized services regarding surgeries and or big private clinics and or private hospitals like we see in the United States. So I don't know if there's anything stopping people who in the private sector from wanting to put a private MRI, CT, ultrasound clinic somewhere in the province. I don't know if there's actually any hurdles they'd have to clear. But you're right, John. No one can argue that point. If you get an MRI done, then it's only valuable if we have the results read correctly.
Perfect. That's right. Because, I mean, the thing is, like, after the first MRI I had, 2 years before, for them to read that I had a tumor in the brain, somebody should have said that, oh, yeah, look, he got a brain right there. But I suffered 2 years. First MRI right on University in Montreal.
Right. Now, the cell phone reception is breaking up. I guess you did indeed move one little way or the other. John, anything else before I take another call?
No, that's perfect. And I just wanted to let you know an uphead on that MRI, but I will call you back on the cell phone service too, sooner or later. Thank you very much, sir, for your day.
You're welcome, John. All the best. All right, bye-bye. Let's go to line number 2. Ken, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi there.
Good day, Paddy. It's Ken. We're a bunch of harvesters gathered in here at the Confederation building today in a protest for a number of things, actually. Pricing being one for the crab. But most of what I heard in here yesterday, they were talking about they want more processing licenses issued, outside buyers and whatever they can get to help process the fish, because we can't capitalise on all the fish that we're able to bring in, capelin, squid and everything, if their plants is going to be blocked up with crab all the time. There's a processing capacity issue, and nobody wants to address it. The union is out to lunch. Forget them, they're a lost cause. So I'm not a crab fisherman, by the way, but I'm in here today to support the boys because I know how important it is. I'm a fisher, yes, but I don't have a crab license. As far as I'm concerned, the fishermen right now got nobody to stand up for them, nobody to represent them, only themselves. And the more that can be here, the better. And that's basically why I'm calling today, is to get it out to the fishermen that we're going to occupy the house here, the gallery, until we get some answers. So yesterday we did get the opposition leader out on the step and the fisheries critic. and they promised to ask these questions, a few of the questions that we gave them yesterday. They're going to voice or put it in the House today, and hopefully try to get some answers for us.
There was a couple of small processing licenses granted in the last few years, which is good news. But of course, the big companies, I suppose, they have a very loud voice of trying to keep smallers out of the business. So last year was different, right? So the anomaly of the 6-week tie-up really made for a problem regarding capelin and cod and maybe some other species as well. But in years prior to that, was it the same type of confusion and the lack of access to a buyer?
Well, some said last year was because of the tie-up, but I mean, the year before that was the same issue where I'm from. Anyway, you could only go 1 day a week, and you could only bring in half your quota, and it was like it before that too. So yesterday in here, there's a processor in here, got a plant, is ready to go with the crab. Everything is ready. He got the employees and everything. Is what he said here yesterday. All he needs now is Elvis Lovelace's signature on the application, and the application was on Elvis's desk, he said, for 3 years. So I don't know what's going on with that. I mean, somebody is stalling that, and you can only imagine who that can be. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But the union had all this time to try to straighten this out for us, and we said this last fall, and we said it 100 times, of course. This happens every spring. The fisherman is in here or somewhere complaining or protesting and fighting around, and it's all because the union never done nothing for them.
So capacity on the processing side is one thing, but when it comes to price, of course, the association will want to pay what they think is fair and as little as possible. Reason? Profits. Same thing with the harvester. They'll want maximum dollar for the price of crab. What gets lost in all of this is exactly what the market can bear. So I will assume that they're going to end up saying something like, the percentage of the market value will be given to the harvesters, whatever that number is, and the other percentage will be given to the processors. Because people can want, back to the day of $7.60 a pound, but that's not coming. So I don't know what the right price is this year. What was it? Started at $2.20, made it all the way to $2.60 maybe last year. So that kind of gets lost in the shuffle here because both sides want as much as they can get. That's just human nature. That's nature of the beast to be in a business, right? So they better figure that issue out, that process out sooner than later, because the old process for establishing a price was brutally flawed. The FFAW puts in one, the ASP puts in one, and they pick one or the other. No compromise, no going down the middle, no nothing, no way to wiggle around. So that's got to be settled because snow crab season is right around the corner.
Yes, that's true. The price is a major thing for the impellers over there, but I was surprised yesterday when I heard them all talking about they want more processing licenses and they want outside buyers, and this is what they were shouting out to Tony Wakeham and Greg Pardy there on the steps. I mean, the price hardly was even mentioned in here yesterday. Capacity is the problem that most of them are getting on with there yesterday. So, and I had that problem with my own fish. I'm only at cod and lobster, and the same thing with me. You could only go 1 day a week and only bring in half your quota. So I'm in here to support them, and every fisherman, I think, anyone that got a fishing license should be in here, as far as I'm concerned, because that's the only way. I know they were all in here before and nothing happened, but that's all you got left is one another. We got no union, we got no representation whatsoever. And that's one thing I'm doing now. I got a form gone into the Labour Relations Board to try to get me out of the union, so I don't have to pay him. He says, I'm not paying no one for doing nothing.
So where are they coming up short?
Well, there's 2 processing licenses supposed to be announced before Christmas. And then processors are waiting for it. And they're not announced. And there's supposed to be a cap lifted on the one in St. Mary's Bay. And that wasn't announced either. And there's numbers thrown around here yesterday that there was over 3 million pounds of crab last year dumped. Never made it to a plant or a market. Wasn't fit to process, is what they were saying. Was on the wharf in places. One place they said there was 10 or 12 tractor trailers lined up all the time with crab on board waiting to go through the plant. So what? Don't that tell you anything? The plant can't handle it, but they want it all themselves. They don't let no one else in here.
I appreciate the time this morning, Ken. Thanks for the call.
Appreciate yours too. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Miles Russell, one of the candidates for Ward 4, wants to talk about Rennie's River Walking Trail. Barry's there to talk about moose applications, then I believe success rates from last year. Mike wants to talk about access to information, cell phones, whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to one of the 4 candidates running in Ward 4 in the city of St. John's. That's Miles Russell. Good morning, Miles. You're on the air.
Good Good morning, Patty. Not a bad day in St. John's, all things considered.
Not bad at all.
No, what I want to remind people of real quick before I just dive quickly into one of the topics. Thursday, tomorrow, the 7th, that's the last day for mail-in ballots to go into Canada Post. If you missed that, you can still drop off your ballots at City Hall or the Holiday Inn on the corner of McDonald Drive and Portugal Cove Road, or the Ken Mountain Terrace Community Centre on the 12th of March. Also, tonight, Happy City is hosting a debate between myself, Nick, Tom, and Greg, the 4 candidates. That's going to be streamed on Facebook. Hopefully they don't have their services going down. That's going to be at 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. today. It's for public viewing. Questions will be moderated by a third party, Dr. Schwartz. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up for people as well.
Yeah, fair enough. It's always important to put those deadlines for mail-ins and what have you in play. Fair ball. So you want to talk about the Rennies River Walking Trail. What about it?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of residents reach out to me, and one of them was Pete Soucy, and I believe you're familiar with the man. He reached out, started protecting pedestrian trails, and I was honest with the man, and I told him exactly what my plans were. Any infrastructure cost or project that's 100 times the cost of a similar project, I'm not in favor of. That's just a civil infrastructure problem. So Rennies River Trail, that segment that residents have a lot of concerns with, that has a bill of over $2,000 a meter. Now, it cost about $6,000 to build an actual road with water and sewer and sidewalks and utility poles. So for a walking trail to have that expense is just absolutely bonkers. Right next to it is a road that is underused. It's 9.5 meters wide, has on-street parking that's free and underutilized, and it would cost around $30 a meter to put a protected space on that road. So I said that to him. I said, this is what I want to do. I want accessible spaces for people to walk and for people's accessibility needs to have access all year. But spending $2,000 a meter is just a fiscal failure on St. John's Council to even consider that. And I told him there's other parts of the trails I'm totally fine with because the costs are normal at around $100 a meter or $150, which is a more reasonable cost, say up by the Remax Center and further into Kelly's Brook, the park itself. And he was fine with that. And, I really enjoyed chatting with the man. And, these are kind of concerns that, fiscal management of our urban infrastructure is critical for council to understand. And this is what I do. It's estimating and project management is my background in civil infrastructure. And I worked on that project very briefly with an engineering firm, and everything about it is just wild that we essentially wanted to build a road in a narrow 100-year-old tree trail that was established in the 1800s, So anyway, I kind of want to just bring that up again, had a good conversation with Pete and their group, and want to assure residents that I'm not going after beautiful walking trails. I'm going after car parking that's not utilized. I'm not against cars, but it's a tool, and, like a vice grip's a tool, we don't need to have a toolbox full of vice grips. We need to have alternative modes of getting around the city, and right now the city is only taking cars as a priority, and everything else gets sacrificed for literally 100 times the cost, and that's not right. That's just what I wanted to bring up real quick, and don't forget, again, mail-in ballots for tomorrow, and if you missed that, you can drop it off to one of the 3 ballot boxes on the 12th, and Happy City is doing a debate tonight from 8 to 9 p.m.
Right, so, the whole trailway expansion thing is about shared use, right? So is there not an opportunity for some of the Rennies River Walking Trail and or other parts of the trail network to be developed more for shared use, because it works everywhere else in the country, but lo and behold, like many things here, we pretend it can't work here.
100%. So that's the thing is, I said to Pete and the rest of the members of their group, that it's not about having, for me, the problem is the cost. And I am fine with the trail where the cost is a normal $150-ish a linear meter to install. That would be up near the Remax Center. We need accessible year-round trails. There's lots of people with accessibility needs that cannot access our parks in the winter or even most of the summer because gravel's a hard surface to, get on unless you're able-bodied. So I said that to him. It's what we need to do is have a city council that understands the cost ramifications of their decision. And there was a perfect bypass on a road nearby that has no houses on one side, and for, again, $20 to $30 a meter, we could put in a protected bike space and active transportation space, shared use path, right next to this 100-plus-year-old trail with tall trees And the fact that the city didn't even consider that is a failure of their lack of knowledge in traffic planning and transportation management.
Let's stick with transportation for a second, Miles. I read a thread yesterday on social media from you talking about expansion of Metrobus. So basically what you're saying, if the towns of CBS, Portugal Coast, St. Phillips, Torbay, Mount Pearl, Paradise, if they committed 5% of their budget to Metrobus, what would the result be based on your evaluation?
Well, so the evaluation, that's a budgetary constraint. That sets up to around $30 and a bit million of funding, which is about a 50% increase on the current Metrobus funding.
Yep.
But more importantly, the ethos to which Metrobus plans is an outdated, non-modern standard of basically transit planning. They use single-point transfers. They're using non-directional bus. They don't have wayfinding. And I can get into all the nitty-gritty, but essentially our buses are confusing. They force single-point transfers. They're not accessible, and they do a circuitous route, and they try to maintain what's called the 5-minute, 400-meter walk distance. That's not what modern cities do. That's not Calgary. That's not Toronto. That's not even Halifax. What's normal is your express routes are the 1.2-kilometer, 15-minute walk, but you run highly frequent buses. So in Toronto, the core routes run every 6 minutes to 7 minutes. But you do have to walk 15 minutes to get there. But if you want to wait once an hour, you can get a bus that is only a 5-minute walk away or closer. Metrobus, every one of their buses operates on the less efficient method, and because of that, we cannot have frequent buses. It would only take, right now, Metrobus has 54 operational vehicles with 44 operating full-time. That's the maximum they'll allowed for maintenance reasons. If we were to take those 44 buses and make 3 core routes, we could service all of existing Mount Pearl, Paradise, and St. John's with frequent buses every 15 minutes, all day, 7 days a week, from 6 a.m. to basically midnight. If we want to add Portugal Coast, St. Phillips, Torbay, and CBS, we can add another express route. Each one of those takes around 8 buses to operate. But again, it's like the planning inside Metrobus and the Metrobus Commission are completely unhinged. They have no oversight, and because of that, Metrobus it will never be a good service until we start to reform the way Metrobus operates, and they need to use modern urban planning and transit planning.
And then with that, the concept of if you build it, they will come. We do have a cultural resistance to public transportation in this province. People sometimes refer to Metrobus as the loser cruiser. But you can go to Toronto or Calgary or Vancouver and see someone with a $5,000 suit sitting alongside a student because they use public transportation. There's no stigma associated with it. It's a convenient way to get around without the additional expense of gasoline and parking and the like. So we've just got to kind of change our tune about what public transportation actually means.
100%. There was the president of, I want to say, Colombia in the late 90s. I can't remember their name. They had said, talking about North America, Canada, and the U.S. specifically, they said, a modern country, the wealthy take public transit. In a poor country, the wealthy hide in their cars. That's essentially the quote. And they were saying that, in North America, we don't put money into public transit, and it's because all of our transportation management is actually just looking at car traffic. And if you only look at it through the lens of one tool in the toolbox, you get a toolbox full of ice grips. And that leads to high stormwater runoff, which makes development harder. It leads to more snow storage. It leads to traffic simulations. Like the city just rejected an existing commercial building that's already existed or zoned for commercial for a restaurant. And the city said, there's not enough parking, rejected. Okay, great. It's in the middle of downtown, Patty. Hundreds of people can walk to this store in 10 minutes. Actually, more like 1,000. So why on earth would the city, because one or two missing car parking spaces, because, again, they're blinded by just one tool in the toolbox. And that leads to things like Rennie's Mill Trail having a budget cost of $2,000 plus a meter, which, again, is, I want to reiterate, 100 times the cost of the alternative method, literally right next on the other side of the river. So, yeah, you're right. From public transit standpoint, if we build a good system and make traffic for cars not the only lens of getting people around the city, we can make Metrobus reliable. And if we start partnering with groups like Confederation Building, the Health Science Center, Memorial University themselves, start to get companies on board with offering incentives to their employees and students for taking public transit, that's how you boost it. And again, once the system gets going, you don't need those incentives because people will realize it's a good system. It's just, unless we have a good system, no one's going to use it.
As part of it. I appreciate the time this morning, Miles. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Miles Russell, running in Ward number 4. Break time. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line 4, Mike, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Patty, after Dave Diamond and Ron Johnson were on your show, to try and justify the spending to the Compass Group and that, whatever, what their contract is worth. I went and I sent you a copy of it, of the ATIP request for the number of Compass employees. And they came back with, I will read it, what it says here, 72 Compass Group employees supporting the management of NLHC support services for both Eastern Urban and Eastern Rural zones. This group supports the management agreement for leading NLHC HS employees and services. So they've got 72 employees there under this agreement that's worth $800,000, which means that we're paying. I was wrong before. I thought they had 40 employees. That was $20,000 per year for each employment. But it works out to only $11,000 for a Compass employee, which is totally and utterly ridiculous. You know, they, as far as I'm concerned, they came on to your show and they conned the people into what they said, and they they said that they come back and justify what it is. Also into this, like, these people are the ones who are saying what goes on in government and what's happening. This company is also engaged into the virtual care. As we know, know that is Compass employees. This is not listed here as employees. Also, they're in the air ambulance services. They're also into nursing, traveling nurses and that stuff, supplying nurses and that around the world to different organizations.
Yeah, we're not in bed with those types of nurses, though.
Pardon?
We're not in bed with Compass Group with travel nurses.
We don't know because we can't find out the contracts of who owns these companies. We know that they're into the business, but I'm trying to find out of who actually owns the companies. Like, the government don't even know the companies because they have here in this response. I know the Seaboard, CBORD, they're a Compass-owned company who has contracts with them. The virtual care people who just won the contracts for the virtual care, they have contracts net with them. So, according to this here, there's a lot of other companies. This Compass Group owns well over 200 companies in Canada. So we don't know who these companies are. The government don't know who these companies are. But the Compass Group were in there with 72 employees working every day to make money for the Compass Group from our healthcare dollars. Our healthcare dollars are the only ones that are supplying the income to this company through these 72 employees. So how much money is actually going out of this province that they're buying from their own companies, ordering the government employees to do whatever they says? They are the bosses of these companies, of Eastern Health employees. So, you know, we got a big mess here that can only be straightened out by the Minister of Health and the Premier. The comptroller that they're talking about bringing in, the Auditor General and all the rest of it, they do not have the authority to do a proper investigation because into the contract between the Compass Group and the government, that Compass Group can subcontract to whoever they want, and the government has no rights to any of those contracts. So we've got a big mess here on our hands with not $800,000 that Ron Johnson said is going to the Compass Group. It's more like $800 million a year going to the Compass Group. And, you know, we're being conned. And something has to be done. But it has to be done with unicism between the government, the opposition, and everything else. And Tony Wakeham. He's voicing his opinion, but he's not getting right to the crutches of what the Auditor General can do. The Auditor General can only go in and look at the records. They probably don't even see, they're not even allowed to see goes on. They can't investigate people. They can't interview people. They can't get to the crux. All they can go is go on to what is on the government records. And they're handicapped. The same way with the comptroller that they call. all of those people, I've been to them all, and find out that they can't do anything. So basically, the only way that we're going to get any satisfaction from any of this is from people like Leela Evans and Tony Wakeham and all the rest of it to come out and put up a strong opposition to fight the privatization of our healthcare at a cost that we can't afford. And as everybody knows, all you got to do is look at our healthcare and look at what we got. It's dismal, and it's only going to get worse because these 72 employees, tomorrow they're going to be 73 and 74 because every management position that comes available in these services with NLHHS shall be filled by Compass employees. So there's no more government employees going to be hired on in government other than their Compass employee. So when they get the full, say, a couple of hundred employees, we basically got nothing. They're running the whole show. They got everything. They got access to all of our money, all of our computers, access to everything in government, and it can take whatever they want at whatever cost that they want with no controls. So, if we don't do something and do something now, our healthcare is gone. And I don't know why these people don't see it, why they're not coming out, in force and get together and hammer on them. And that's the only way. I looked at it over in England, where this company organizes from or whatever. And apparently the only thing to stop this organization is through the press and the opposition to fight. There's no, organization within government that could do anything about it.
I appreciate the time this morning, and let's see if the opposition members pick up what you're laying down. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye. All right, before we go to the break, we're going to go to 7. Good morning, Barry. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
Paddy, yesterday the government announced the new moose allocation quotas, big game allocation quotas for the island and Labrador. For the island of Newfoundland, Paddy, this year's quota is at 27,590 licenses. If you subtract off the 3,950 licenses for outfitters or non-residents and the 460 licenses for the not-for-profit licenses, you have the number of 23,180, which is down from what we were lobbying for before. Or what I want to talk about, Paddy, is the success rates. And there are approximately 50 moose management areas, Paddy. And I'll just briefly list them off. There is one area on the island that has 80% success rate. There are 6 areas on the island that have 70% plus success rate. There are 10 areas that have 60% plus success rates. There are 22 areas that have 50% success rates, 6 areas with 40%, 6 areas with 30%, and 1 area with 20%. Now, you can fiddle around with the numbers all you want. And they increased the allocation this year by a whopping 15 licenses, which is good to see. But you have to look between the read between the lines, and the success rate for the island overall in 2022, Paddy, is 55.7%.
Yeah, I opened up the email you sent me with success rate, so I was just kind of giving it a basic scroll, but overall, just about a 60% success rate. I don't know how that lines up historically, and I'm not surprised that we're very much in the same window or ballpark with the licenses overall that we were last year, which I don't know if that's the right number or the wrong number, but it's hard to evaluate or give it a grade because I'm not really sure exactly if anybody knows how many animals are there anyway.
To give the wildlife credit, Paddy, it would be near impossible to get an exact number, but they should be able to get an approximate number. And Paddy, since we've been lobbying, I think now since 2019, they increased the aerial surveys up to 10 per year. They should have some good indication what the population approximately is. It seems, though, that with these low success rates, it's what I and other hunters around the province have been saying is that the moose population is in decline. The numbers don't lie, Paddy.
No, I don't dispute it. But, you wonder why there's such a variance in success rate. Because for some areas where we've seen some development, whether it be small residential and or big commercial or industrial, of course, that would have distinct impact on success rates and the presence of the animals. So that's where it becomes difficult. Like if I were scroll down to what you provided, and I'm glad you sent it along, it's hard to know and differentiate between 35% success rate in Sally's Cove versus 58.4 in Portland Creek. So is it simply about the number of animals? Is it about people's willingness to stick it out and have a hard time getting their moose? Is it about development? That's where I'm trying to see if I can, assess some of the progress and development that I know has happened in certain areas and compare and contrast it to other areas where the success rate drops right through the floor.
Yes, indeed, and that's a good synopsis there, Paddy. The thing is, though, what I think is that the moose just simply aren't there.
Could be.
And you have the big game hunters. I mean, years ago, Paddy, when the moose population was over healthy, and I say that over healthy, you could go down. Didn't matter what time of the year you went out hunting, early, mid, or late. You were seeing moose, and your chance of harvesting moose was good. Now, however, people are saying that the moose go back in the country in November month. Well, where is back in the country anymore, Paddy? Everything's opened up by ATVs and everything else. Where's back country? And why is it in the past that people were able to harvest moose up around the highways in November and December and seeing moose? The answer is the moose population is in decline, and the animals just simply aren't there, and government isn't willing to listen to us. And, God, it can't be just that small bit of money. They're getting $60 from each big game hunter for a license. Or is it?
Well, I doubt it. If that factors in, then that's, we're counting the beans pretty tight if that's the case. But, there's big questions, and you could be right. I mean, there could be a massive decline in numbers. I don't know. They have accelerated the head count process and the number of drone flights taken. But if you got a license out in 25 in Bay d'Espoir, 75% success rate. You got one in Salmonair in Area 33, 34. So there's some big swings there. And when we were growing up, the moose were everywhere in Salmonair. Everywhere.
Indeed. And as well, Paddy, one other thing that's affecting the population, and you just brought up a good one, the Bay d'Espoir, and what was the other one you used? I'm sorry?
Salmonair.
Yep. Well, look at the number of the size of the area and the number of licenses. The number of licenses for Salmonair was astronomically high for a number of years, and the moose population as a result took a beating. And now people who have been going Salmonair for years and years hunting are saying, where's the moose?
Yeah.
They don't even see a track.
Well, 325 licenses Salmonair, in Bay d'Espoir, 275.
Yes.
I think that's the way that chart reads, yeah.
You look at the Bjorn Foot, where it has 80%, or the knee, it has 80% success rate. How long is that going to be before they've already increased the number of licenses for that area?
Yeah, and I gave out an incorrect number for Bay d'Espoir. The total quota was 500, but I had it scroll down so far it's either sex or male. So anyway, there you go.
And I had a license out Bay d'Espoir in 22. I was lucky enough to fill it, but I did go the first trip without seeing one. Luck to hunt, and next trip I seen 8 or 9.
Yeah, and up the Southern Shore, which used to be absolutely hotspot. You were lucky to get a license in 36. 1050 was the allocation for total quota last year. 700 either sex, 350 for male only, and less than 50% success rate. Interesting numbers. Anything else, Barry, before we make a break for the news?
Terranova National Park is 16.7%.
Yeah.
The Avalon MRZ, the highway zone for here on the Avalon, is 32% for 600 licenses. So the numbers don't lie, Paddy. But the government doesn't seem to be willing to listen. And it's going to be too late, and I think that there's high time for the hunters of Newfoundland and Labrador to get their act together and form a group that has a strong voice. Speak up, or else it will be too late. I'm not a pessimist, Paddy, you know that.
I appreciate the time. They're waving me off to the break, Barry, but it's a fair summary to say the numbers don't lie, because the numbers are what the numbers are. I appreciate the time this morning. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Patty. It's always been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Barry. Take care. All right, bye-bye. When we come back, Otto's there to talk about cell phones. Robert wants to talk about the wind to hydrogen ammonia proposal in Exploits Valley. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 1. Otto, you're on the air.
Hello, Paddy.
Hello there.
How are you feeling, buddy?
I'm doing okay. Otto, you must have been pleased with the Caribou knocking out the Shore.
Yeah, but they're in a hole now. The Cats won 2 games the weekend.
Yeah.
They got one guy there, Noah Wilson, I think his name is, number 25. Man, can he move. He's a small guy, but he's shifty, I tell you right now. He can go right through the whole team, eh? Now, the Caribous didn't play all that good, but then again, the Cats had them bottled up, eh? They're on top of them, eh? Wouldn't let them escape, right?
Fair enough.
They were playing poor checking good, eh? Man, they're down in the hole. They're down 2 games, so 7-3, I think, the last game of Sunday I watched there. But they haven't received them CDs yet.
I don't know what to say, man. I've been waiting to hear the update from you. Now, if there's some shag up inside the post, because my home address is a return to sender option for them. So
unreal.
If something happens, hopefully you get it. Hopefully at least I get them back, because I'll try again.
Yeah, I'd say you're going to join her, probably.
Hope not.
Paddy, the cell phone, Paddy. Everywhere it goes, people put their head down with a cell phone all day. Man, they're going to have some bad neck, eh? Man, oh man, people today will want to live to be 60 or 50. The government is going to spend a mint on open heart surgery. But they don't do nothing, only fool with their phones, eh?
Okay.
Man, oh man, I lost more sweat one night than the guys do in a year now.
So what are you talking about, the use of cell phones and sore necks? What does that mean?
Everywhere you go, you're going to merge. Everyone's there with a cell phone, playing games on their cell phone.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Unreal. They're going to have some bad neck, I guarantee you that.
Fair enough.
Paddy, when you come this way, Paddy?
I don't know. We were talking about going skiing, but we're going to have to wait to see how the weather is.
Yeah, we're supposed to have bets, I think, Friday or Thursday, Friday.
Yeah, if it's too messy, we probably won't go, but we're not going to decide now until Friday evening. We'll see what it looks like.
Well, you're welcome to come here, Paddy, for a little visit, boy, and a little chat.
I appreciate it.
And Leon Chalk, if you're ever up to Walmart, we're at that first set of lights, say, going up the hill there. You turn right, and you come out, still going on there straight, that's Beaumont Street. You turn right again, that's Ridgement Road, R-E-G-I-M-E-N-T.
Yep.
So we're on 27. She's welcome to come. If she's up to Walmart, drop in for coffee. Leanne.
Yeah.
I hope to see you at the hockey game, but I got my doubts. I think they're going to 4 straight.
Well, hopefully they stick it out and make a series out of it. I appreciate the time.
Well, we won a couple games against the Breakers on the road, but like I said, they won games against Capsay, but they got an awesome team, boy, fast, right? They can play, right?
Well, that's the nature of the beast, and hopefully the Caribou can find an answer, because when you're getting bottled up and you can't find a way to get some space and get some speed going, of course, you just get frustrated then.
They got a fast skating team, ground with that, but like you said, they're bottled up.
Yeah, it's a tough way to play. Then you get frustrated, and then you're holding on the stick too tight, and before you know it, you're getting away from your game plan.
And Whiffen didn't play a good game on Sunday. 7 goals, you know. He's usually a real good goalie, right?
Well, Whiffen for the longest while was the best goalie in the province.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
If it ever comes out, Paddy, drop in, for God's sake.
I appreciate the invitation, Otto, and thanks for the call this morning.
All right, and Leon, if she's up to Walmart, drop in.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, see you, buddy.
See you, Otto. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, and in addition to cell phones, like this morning talking about education, in particular school bus safety, and an incident that was reported on a school bus, and then of course dovetailed with the story regarding charges laid against a Woodstock, Ontario bus driver and one of the parents of one of the children who was injured, talk about the need to have seatbelts on the bus. It's kind of remarkable that hasn't been a bigger conversation over the years, because we talk about just how important it is and the role of the school bus driver to simply get our children in in and out of school safely on the school bus. And that not only requires the driver, but for the rest of us to pay attention to the school buses. You know, how often have you seen it where a school bus stops, deploys the blinking red lights, extends the stop sign with blinking red lights on it, which means everyone has to do what? Stop in both directions. But yet, that's not always the case. So, well, yes, we could talk about seatbelts on the bus, and yes, we could talk about the motoring public's adherence to the flashing red lights, which is a pretty clear indication that the bus is stopping to let someone off of the bus. And who wants to be the person that strikes and hurts or kills a child because you were in some sort of panic to get to the next red light? Let's check in on the Twitter before we get to the news. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. And of course, we've had many a conversation about the wind proposal on the Port-au-Port Peninsula. Maybe not so much down the Burin Peninsula. Maybe not so much at the Port of Argentia or in the Exploits Valley. But that's what we're going to talk about right after the newscast. Robert's there to talk about the proposal in Exploits. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Robert, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. How about you?
Oh, I'm a little bit anxious, losing a bit of sleep over all these wind turbine developments, as well as a lot of other people in the area telling me they're losing sleep as well. So, I'm calling in today because today is March 6th, and that's 3 months since the last public information session that was held by Everett and Botwood, and we still haven't heard any responses back from those companies, from any of the emails that I'm aware of that anybody has sent to them. So I just wanted to put that out there. So my big concern right now with this development is not just the lack of contact from the company itself or the proponent, but I'm very concerned right now about the whole approval process from the government side of things. So one question I have is, are you aware of why they extended the deadline for the applications for these wind energy projects? Because that's an answer I haven't been able to get.
No, I don't know.
No, and I haven't been able to get it either. So from my information that I found is that exploits area wasn't even discussed until December 14th of 2022 was the first mention of exploits area being developed as a wind energy hub. So I'm curious if the extension was granted in order to allow EVREC to submit their application. But again, we're not getting answers from anybody. We've sent emails to many levels of government officials. We're waiting responses back from Access to Information request that was extended for 20 days. But I'm not getting answers from anybody, even the government levels, liberal and conservative. They're saying wait for the environmental impact statement or study, sorry.
Just a quick question. Now, what would be the concern with the extension for application deadlines? Is there a downside to allowing folks to get their ducks in a row for an appropriate and thought-through application?
Well, no, that's actually a good idea to have their ducks in a row. But unfortunately, with this Everett proposal, since their original proposal of 300 turbines, they've also gone up 50% to 452 wind turbines at 7 megawatts, which those turbines stand 656 feet tall from base to tip. So I'm questioning the accuracy and the approval process of that original submission or application. And as well, I just want to add as well, the letters of support from the communities that were given, they were all based off that initial report or the initial information given early in 2023. So since the scope of work has increased, the number of turbines has increased by 50%, in my opinion, those letters of support are now invalid. So I think it's unethical and unfair for the company to still say that they have support from the communities when they have outdated letters of support. And as well, with the case of EVREC, I've been doing a lot of research into their history. It seems there's been some news articles reporting that they are being suspected of insider information and profiteering. So with their former green energy and Bitcoin mining operation, there's been reports showing that they started mining Bitcoin just after a closed-door meeting in China with concerns about all the energy that was being used for their Bitcoin mining at the time. Now, there's no charges or any actual laws that were broken from what I can see, but like I said, there are public articles out there.
Okay, and just so I understand your perspective, that particular issue, how does that relate to the proposals here, and what would that present as a problem for you?
Well, I'm just curious as if they have insider connections here in order to extend the deadline to get in with a shoddy proposal in order to get access to our areas. So if there is insider connections that are being taken advantage of in our area, then that signals a larger problem with leadership. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to come up with a relation between the two, because, you know, whether there's an accusation of inside track, or you have the ear of the Premier or ear of senior officials or the Minister of Environment or Industry, Energy and Technology, I mean, would that be the case for all of them? Because there wasn't just an extension offered for one proposal, was there?
No, that's right. And that's also a good point as well, because of the optics and access to information from the West Coast by a member over there. Like he's also found that some of the dates line up to the fishing trip that Premier Furey and his father took with John Risley of the West Coast projects. So there's a lot of unanswered questions, and there's a lot of information that we're being presented with that doesn't seem to be factual or accurate at this point, considering that Senator Furey, or former Senator Furey, is working now with GH2's company with the ammonia storage, I believe.
Yeah, we're talking about a pretty small swimming pool, though, here too, aren't we? You know, because there's always going to be the possibility or the optics of inside track, and who knows who versus who knows what. Because again, at the tops of industry and at the tops of finance and at the tips of politics, there's pretty heavy overlap. Some of that, you know, and I'm not dismissing the concern, because it's always got to be part of the consideration here, but we're talking about very few people that appear in very prominent roles time and time again, and they all have some sort of relationship, whether it be business or personal.
That's right. Yeah, no, I agree with that completely, because, I mean, you're not just going to take somebody off the street and trust them with billions of dollars of federal taxpayer money and development of a project here, but that seems to be what's happening here in Central, because the guys that created EVREC, they are not millionaires from what I can see. Their net worth is, for the chairman and creator of the company, Ravi, he's, from what I've seen online, his net worth is about $500,000. So, I mean, most people who have a home and a cabin in Newfoundland, then their net worth is probably higher than his. As well, with their company, I'm trying to find information, but if you look on their, just a little practice for you, if you go onto the evrec.ca website or on their Abraxas website, you can see their address that they have listed as their home office, which is in Toronto. I don't have it here on top of my head, but if you take that address and you put it into a Google search bar, it'll come up with a law firm in Toronto. So it doesn't appear that they have any physical address or offices in Canada at the moment. So I'm just curious again as to the information that's being presented to the locals here, and being told to trust the process and trust the government when we aren't getting accurate information or answers to our questions. And now EVREC itself is hiding behind the fact that they're saying in the last meeting that they don't want to give any information until it's 100% factually accurate, which is respectable. But at the same time, there's nobody getting any responses back from any questions, and they should have answers to at least some of them.
Fair enough. And, you know, this comment that I'll make now is something I've said many times in the past. Even if you're supplying answers that the questioner doesn't want to hear, it's better than silence. Silence leads to going down the paths of all sorts of exaggerations or potential worst-case scenarios. And I just don't know why companies and politicians alike don't figure out that very basic concept of, you know, answering questions is better than silence. It just always will be. You might be told something you simply do not want to hear, but at least you have an answer.
Yes, and just another point I want to add with the approval process from the government. I'm pretty sure that one of the pre-requirements that they needed to have was a decommissioning plan in place. Isn't that correct?
Yep.
So when in the meeting in December, I specifically asked, is there a decommissioning fund or a plan funds held in trust by the government or a plan in place for decommissioning? And he flat out said, or Ravi Sud, sorry, not he, he stated no. Short answer, no. Once the turbines are in, they're there forever. So I'm really questioning the whole approval process at this point, considering that he doesn't meet that criteria.
Well, he doesn't get to make those decisions, though, Robert. We asked Minister Parsons that direct question yesterday, not only about decommissioning cost, but who would be responsible in full and whether or not that would have to be in place before final approval was granted. He said yes. Liability funding and or decommissioning plans are part of the final approval process. So it doesn't matter what Ravi Sood says, because if the government quite clearly and well documented on this program is that those things have to be in place, then again the proponent really doesn't have any say in the matter here. They either follow along what the process and procedures are, or they don't.
But even to be at this point in the stage, they need to have a decommissioning plan already in their proposal. And if he's saying that he doesn't have a plan, then my question is, how did he even get to this point in the process?
Okay, I can't answer.
These companies are all supposed to be vetted and verified in order to have the financial capacity to construct and operate these facilities. But yet we can see one by one these companies are going for federal dollars in order to proceed with the application processes. Now, my question is, for the one on the West Coast, the GH2 that was recently announced, $128 million, is that secured by anything, or is it just an unsecured debt that's given by the government? So if this company goes bankrupt or doesn't meet its doesn't get approval in order to proceed, or doesn't have a market in order to start construction, do they have to pay that back if they claim bankruptcy? And as well for the decommissioning costs, if these projects fail or they go way over budget and the expected cost to produce this ammonia is higher than what they anticipate and there's no market without further government subsidies, if they claim bankruptcy, how will they pay to decommission these if there's not funds held in trust before the project even breaks soil?
Well, I mean, that's a secured creditor issue. That's, which can indeed be addressed in approvals. It's tricky when you don't have a financial relationship with the entity, because we will not, so says the government repeatedly. So that becomes a very tangly receivership issue where I don't know if anyone's got an answer to that particular question at the moment, Robert. Anything else very quickly before I have to go?
There's one more thing that I wanted to say, just real quick here for a second. I got to check my notes. So a big question I have as well is, why is the government allowing the water supplies to be used for this project and the exploits, as well as some others, I believe, to be coming from salmon rivers that are struggling in the summer months already? And then if they do have the mitigation plans, they don't have mitigation plans for wildlife at this point in time, basically from the World Energy GH2 EIS, they're saying that they will monitor and then they will mitigate if required. So again, if there are a big number of bats and birds that are being killed by these wind turbines once they're installed, if they shut down during light winds in order to protect the bats, where is their power coming from for the 24-hour operations? Because we can have days of light winds and the wind turbines may not be effective to produce power. So then if that comes from our grid, are they going to be selling power back to the customers or back to hydro at a higher cost than what they're purchasing it for? So again, there's so many questions that we have from every level of government, including federal, with the environmental aspect of it. The federal should be overseeing the fisheries and oceans, indigenous lands, as well as migratory birds.
Well, that's already been settled. They said they're not getting involved.
Exactly, but in my opinion, they should absolutely get involved, especially considering that they're providing money for these companies to proceed in the process. So they're just wiping their hands of it to leave the mess up to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to clean up once it all fails. So I don't personally see any of these proposals or projects being successful without huge government subsidies continuing on during the operations from both Canada and Germany. So I'm very, very sick to my stomach and losing sleep over this, like I said earlier on.
I appreciate the call, Robert. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, there's an interesting story coming out of Bay Roberts. So the town council and the mayor, specifically Walter Yettman, quite pleased when a developer came forward to talk about building 20 affordable units. Then all of a sudden the feedback maybe tempered some of that excitement. We'll hear from the mayor of Bay Roberts right after this. And then we're going to talk about the story, which is really hard to wrap your mind around, the 4 freezer units outside the Health Sciences Centre that's housing dead bodies. Some 28, it was the most recent count. Apparently, people aren't, collecting the body of their lost kin. Remarkable story. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Say good morning to the Mayor of Bay Roberts. That's Walter Yettman. Mayor Yettman, you're on the air.
Hello, Paddy. How are you?
I'm doing well this morning. How about you?
Doing well. How's the audio?
The audio's not too bad. David, we might want to pot the mayor up a little bit, but you sound fine. Let's go back to when you were first approached by a developer. What did he or she say they were proposing for your town?
Okay, so I'm going to say probably 3 weeks ago, it came through our council meeting. It was an application for 20 units. So this total development has potential for probably 30 units, but right now we're dealing with 20. I'm going to use approximate numbers here, but I know the application is for 20. So right now it's in a residential zone, and so in our residential zoning, currently we have multi-unit buildings as a discretionary use, which can be a bit of a challenge, but as a discretionary use, that means it has to go to the public. We publish it, and it goes to the public for their input, and so that's where we're to now. So we're accepting feedback, and of course we respect the process. We respect the concerns of the residents around the area, and they have there are potential concerns, and of course this all goes hand in hand with when you hear about affordable housing, and of course there's some stigmas involved with affordable housing, but sometimes the understanding. So I have to be clear that this is going through council now, and any remarks I make are my own opinion, not based on council's opinion. And I can't, of course, give any opinions on this development as we're still dealing with it, but I certainly have some opinions on where housing is going, especially in rural Newfoundland as well, is changing.
Sure. Before we get into what constitutes affordable and some of the stigma attached, describe what the development proposal looks like. Are we talking about 4 apartment unit buildings? Because you're talking 20 units, but 20 units inside of what? 4 buildings, 1 building, 2 buildings?
Yep. So this one is 4 5-plexes. Okay. I'll call it. Okay, 4 or 5 unit plexes, and that's the way I term it anyway. So we'll have 4 buildings, and further down the road, I'm not sure, but it could be, as most of these developments are triplexes, 4plexes, 5plexes, and that's what this is, not under one roof.
Very good. So, let's get into that whole what people think when they hear the word or the term affordable housing, because for many people, I suppose, their mind goes directly to, well, here comes a bunch of undesirables, versus what might be an affordable unit for a couple of people who are 75 years of age with limited pension money. So that's where some of the pushback comes. So what are you hearing? What types of feedback specifics are you getting?
Okay, well, that's some good points you made there. Really good points. So again, it's a stigma that comes with affordable, and there's different levels of housing, and you meet people where they are. And in this case, it's called affordable housing. It's subsidized. It's a government program. So in these cases, rent is capped at a certain amount for a certain number of years, which, of course, makes it more desirable and affordable. And there's the word affordable coming in. You made the point where a couple retired. They want to leave their single family dwelling, and move to a smaller property. The costs are lower, and they are protected by this capped rent. And I can sometimes refer to even a 2-income family with 2 working people. And sometimes, and these days with inflation and interest rates and all the rest, it's really hard to afford for even a working couple to afford a single family dwelling. And some of these people will take advantage of this affordable housing. So it's, some areas are called 50+ living, seniors living, but I think there's a lot of people out there that need something more affordable because of the cost of running the traditional single family dwelling, and in general, a lot of the rural communities now we're dealing with we need denser housing. We've had the sprawl. I think you mentioned in your at the first of the show, we had the sprawl. I think you mentioned something like that.
I did.
And you did. And so this is what's happening. And land is being taken up. So now we need denser living. So we have to adjust to that. Times are changing. Things are different now. And so I'll just go further into our regulations, and maybe some changes can be made
to not make it easier, but to make it whereas developers can come in and not shy away from offering affordable housing, which we're all going to need, and we need it here at Bay Roberts. We have a shortage of rentals, and again, there's lots of people who want to size down and move into denser living and more affordable living. Affordable again. There you go.
Well, it's going to be the key. I mean, like a lot of things in this world, people just have one thing that their mind races to when we talk about affordable. But affordable for a family of two is different from affordable from a retired senior living alone versus a couple of seniors living alone or a single lady at the age of 35. So there's a lot of different issues, and we can talk about accessibility and affordability and those types of things. So it's even one of the results of the Task Force on Housing, which I'm trying to get through. It's a pretty hefty document. They talk about legalized density. So some of the problem inside municipal bylaws and approach to zoning has led to exactly what you said, sprawl. And what comes with sprawl? You have to build more roads and had to build more water lines, more road to plow, more roads to ice manage, wider distances to travel to pick up garbage. It comes with enormous cost. I know we get used to having our own slice of heaven here and nobody living too close by and not a lot of whole duplex areas, what have you. But the rest of the country, well, that's not fair. A lot of parts of the country have figured out that density can be managed. Sprawl can't.
Can be. And again, the stigma has to lead that. We have numerous affordable housing developments around town, and they are clean and they're respectable, and they offer a good residence for who's there, quiet, clean, and but with our regulations. Okay, you said infrastructure. So we could take, say, a 100-foot road here in Bay Roberts, and so with low density housing, or more denser housing, we can go up that road, and with denser housing, we can probably go up and put one pipe up through there, water and sewer pipe, sidewalks, storm sewer, and all that. In denser housing, you could probably, I'm just going to guess, maybe 60 units if it's planned right. With single-family dwellings, what do you want to get there? Maybe 5, 6, 7 houses at the most. So we need to move towards that. And now it's moving to rural Newfoundland. And I know a lot of cities have, they have a lot of denser living, and but in rural Newfoundland now, we're just outside of St. John's, 45 minutes away. And so we're getting this, we're having the issues come to us now. And so another thing too, Patty, is I know that data is available for the larger centres. That they can look at and say, we have a need here, so we need to take the steps. And I know a lot of bigger centres can afford to go in as a municipality and take advantage of this funding and do their own housing. But, in our case, that's not just possible right now. But the data, we need the data now too. As we're getting crowded, we have a need, but how much need do we have? And this would be good information for the developers. If they see the data and say, yep, Bay Roberts got a need here, so we're going to come forward with an excellent proposal here now, and some really nice affordable developments, that would make a difference too.
Sure. And if you also had the data and the horsepower to fill out the applications for access to the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is a problem in many small municipalities across the country. I'm pretty late for the news, Mary Yevman. I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay, and very quickly, do you mind if I do a couple of public service things for our town?
If they can be done quick.
Okay, so March 16th, 8 p.m. at the Bay Arena, we have the RCMP versus the Fire Rescue, and the monies go to support the breakfast program. And it's a fun night, and to raise some good money there for a good program. And our Summer Games launch, we have the NL Summer Games coming in August 10th to the 17th, and we have a Summer Games launch March 20th at Ascension Collegiate at 7 p.m., where we're going to be searching for volunteers. And we're very excited about the close of the games in Gander this past weekend. We accepted the torch, and of course, we're going to have the games come to Bay Roberts in August. Very excited.
And we'll be out. I appreciate the time this morning, Mary Yetman. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much, Patty, for the time.
My pleasure. Bye-bye. All right, before we get to the news, I want to give you a traffic heads up. There's a minibus broke down on the CBS on-ramp westbound on the Outer Ring Road, so stay clear. Let's take a break. When we come back, the story regarding the 4 freezer units and the 28 dead bodies therein. Strange story. Don't know where we're going to go with that, but let's see right after this. Don't go away.
nutrition, exercise, keeping the cold at bay. Whatever keeps you feeling great, the Wellness and Healthy Lifestyle Show on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the St. John's Centre member for the NDP. He's also leader of the party. That's Jim Dinn. Jim, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thank you for having me on.
No problem.
Before I get into the issue with the reefer units, if I could, I'd just make a quick comment on the interview you just had and about affordable housing. And I know I heard some of the interviews last week about somehow people were confusing affordable housing with low income support housing. I have to say this. I have a number of people in my district, people who reside who are on income support and reside in public housing. But I will tell you this: they do feel the stigmatization of them. But I will admit and they do feel at times that the society judges them as undesirable. But I will tell you that the families I deal with, they're trying to survive. They're getting their kids into finishing education. They're going into post-secondary. They're looking to get into the workplace. All those things. And I think, if anything else, there's a message there. Regardless of the community, everyone deserves an affordable place to live, regardless of what your income level is. And the housing crisis, I guess, as Bonnet has has emphasized that. But I will say this: for most of the people that have come across my office, they're just trying to do what any one of us are trying to do, and that's survive and have a place to raise a family and put a roof over their head. I just had to say that before I went on any further. Sorry about that.
Now, there may indeed be some quote-unquote undesirables living where people constitute affordable houses, but there's so many different factors that play into it. For instance, I could have a husband and wife and 2 children. We both work full-time, are law-abiding citizens, but we don't make enough money to get into a $325,000, 1,200-square-foot bungalow in a single-family dwelling in a school neighborhood, right? And so,
and there might be a lot of undesirable people who are living in $300,000, $400,000 homes as well. So.
Yeah, there's some pretty tony neighborhoods in this town that absolutely have some undesirables.
That's right. So I guess that's my point. It's not always undesirable. Is not always tied to income. That's for sure. And some would say that there are certain politicians who are rather undesirable, even in the person you're currently speaking to. Who knows? I'll tell you why I'm really calling today. This is another, and I will apologize up front and offer my deepest sympathy to anyone whose family members might be actually stored in these reefer trucks outside the health sciences. I just can't imagine what they will be going through. I do extend my understanding and compassion to them because there was a difficult choice to be made, and it was based on their ability to even afford, I guess, a memorial or a funeral service. But I will say this: this is a problem that should have been dealt with long ago. Instead, what we've got, and by the way, I did back in 2020, 2021, this first came to my attention from the issue was raised by a number of funeral homes, and at the time I understood that the problem was actually there seemed to be some movement by government to address it. Here we are, 3 years later, and where the problem is still not solved. I had a call. My office had a call from a worker at one of the hospitals, and I think she was calling about a relative of hers who was stacked on a gurney, 3 on a gurney, and the body was unclaimed, and she wasn't the next of kin, but she was distraught. I will say this. So that started the process. Let's do an ATIP and find out how bad the process is, how bad the situation is. And we sent a letter to Minister Pike at the time, back in February, at the end of February, that this problem needs to be addressed with some solutions as well.
So solutions like what? Because if there's a potential to get $2,338 for burial costs, that hasn't changed in quite a long time. It's certainly nowhere near the cost coverage. 360 people last year, or 22-23, applied for and got got that money, so it added up to about $990,000. So what does the solution look like? Is it a potter's field? Is it increase the burial subsidy, or what is it?
So I'll tell you what the solution is not. Is simply adding on more reefer trucks, and that's just here for the city. We're looking at see what if there's a similar problem in other morgues across the province. So the solution is not simply to install more refrigerated units and store the bodies. And once, without going into the grim details, once the body is frozen, really the only option for a respectful disposition after that would be to cremate it. Okay. So what are the solutions? I think, and this is something that, again, I think this is the conversation that would have been even 3 years ago, and here we are talking about. So I would say let's talk about what are the government rates and index them to the cost, to inflation, okay, to allow for that, so that families know exactly what they're going to get. The application process, if you look at the application, it's a 9-page process. So for people who are on modest incomes, who may be working, who may not qualify for income support, who are seniors and so on and so forth, there's a 9-page means-tested, you name it, process, which is almost it's such a complicated application process. I would say that it would discourage people to begin with, especially depending if they're in the process of grieving. So simplify that process. If nothing else, I would argue is let's get the person before if it gets to the stage of where we've got to look at freezing the body. Why not before it gets there have that conversation? We're going to pay for. Here's the amount. Pay for the burial, and then we'll work with the families and the funeral homes following that. I would say also, if anything else, if indeed it's a case of legislation, Patty, that there's nothing there that provides direction, well, that's a simple fix. Then come up with a policy or protocols or or regulations that would allow for the respectful disposition of bodies that have remained unclaimed. Because, and I will say this again, if a body is frozen, then from what any discussions I've had, research, the only way there won't be an open casket or anything like that. It's going to have to be through cremation. So why do we have to get to this stage? And the solution is a piecemeal approach that's put in the freezer units. And I understand that they're going to try to have a meeting in April to resolve this. Fine. Then I would say that these discussions have been ongoing for a while. The government has foot dragged on it. There are reasonably effective, cost-effective solutions there that would allow for the respectful disposition and also respect the families and be compassionate towards them.
Fair enough. It's a strange and, of course, I don't know if strange is even the right word, but to know that that's where we find ourselves is some sort of condemnation of some process, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that is. Jim, I have to get to the break, but I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.
Take care. All right, bye-bye. Final break of the morning. When we come back, we'll talk about the upcoming budget, big game applications, and if we got time, back in Canada, which held their benchmark interest rate tight at 5 today. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 2. Wayne, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi there.
Patty.
Yes, sir.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
No problem.
I have questions. I guess every year we put out a budget to follow for the year, and I'm sure we put out one last year.
We did.
We did, and was the travel nurses budgeted for that much money in the budget? And when they go over, is there anybody that's taking a look at it to try to keep it in a budget?
Yeah, well, that would be the role of the comptroller. But it's a good question about whether or not the travel nurses appeared in the budget. And I'm going to suggest that that's part of the problem with how the budgets are delivered, is unless you dig through what is called the estimates to get the real nitty-gritty on various individual issues, contracts, and expenditures, they don't break it down that clearly. So I can't even answer your question, and I was in the budget lockup last year, and I don't know if it was in it or not. But curiously that you say it, I've got a copy of the estimates right here in my studio where I'm going to see if I can find it.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. And the other thing is that there should be, like you said, the controller is looking after it. Shouldn't he, once that starts to go out of whack, that he should bring to the attention of the government, and they revisit the expenditures and try to get it approved into the House, rather than to just pay the bill. Because once you pay the bill, you accept what they've charged you for.
Well, that's why I think the right thing to do here, and to put this to bed as once and for all, even if there's a lot of black eyes that come with it, is let's have a look at the contract. You know, Tony Wakeham has the ability, as leader of the official opposition, to get an unredacted copy of that contract. That's my understanding of the parliamentary procedure. So let's do that. Let's understand about the meal allowances. Let's understand about pet transportation and cab costs and transferring pets and buying air fryers and all the rest of it. Let's see the damn contract.
I agree with you. I think that they should disclose, get the disclosure of the contract so everybody can scrutinize and see where it went wrong. Because if you don't figure out where you went wrong, you're never going to fix the mistake in the first place.
100%.
Yeah.
Because I think people are conflating a few things too, right? Like, people are hanging their hat on this $1.6 million for meals. Fair enough, but that issue isn't necessarily really a government issue. If I'm a travel nurse, my problem with that is with Canadian Health Labs. If Canadian Health Labs in negotiations say we're going to cover meal costs to whatever extent, but they're not actually paying the nurses the money, that's a problem with the employer. But yet we're using that as a political hot potato as well.
The thing, too, is if they were billing the government and the government thought that they were supplying the nurses with meals and they didn't, wouldn't that be illegal?
Well, it would be certainly a breach of the contract between the travel nurse and Canadian Health Labs. If that's a part of the contract that was negotiated up front versus an add-on at some point, then it's a different conversation, right? So, again, we have lots of hyperbole and rhetoric and just guesstimates going on. Let's have a look at the contract. Let's see who signed the contract. Let's understand the paper trail between whatever the relationship or not is between the Premier's office and Minister Osborne and anybody else who was involved here. So let's just figure it out. Because if there's a political price to pay, so be it. That's the nature of the beast. That's how the game is played, and whether that's good or bad or indifferent, that's just the reality. So let me see the contract and I'll figure it out for myself. And I mean that collectively.
I agree with you 100%. Hopefully we'll see that soon.
Let's hope so. Wayne, I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Final word this morning goes to line number 5. Jason, you're on the air.
Paddy, how you doing this morning?
Okay, man. You?
Oh, doing good.
Great.
Just calling today. I know you don't have much time left, but just wanted to mention a few things. My friend Amir Sheikh called yesterday, so he called me out, so I said I'd call today.
Perfect. Welcome to the show.
Yes, I want to talk about the Bank of Canada. Obviously, see on the news update that they're not increasing the rate, but all of us can go on the internet any time of the hour or day and look up the history of the Bank of Canada rates. You know, back in the 80s when it was 10, 12, 14%. And we all know the recession that we had in 08, 09 when they lowered the rates. I just wonder why they didn't act from 2010 to 2020, and then COVID hit, and they used that excuse. They flooded the economy with billions of dollars. The inflation went to 8.1% in June of 2022. Anybody can Google that as well to back up what I'm saying. And how did it get to 8.1% when every month now everybody's waiting for the Bank of Canada to give an update on inflation? What were they doing to let it get to 8.1%? And there should be some accountability there. So if you and I weren't doing our job right, your boss would sit you down and say, listen, you're going to have to pick it up or we're going to have to let you go. So they say the government, the Liberals, or the federal government does not control the Bank of Canada. But why are they not accountable for letting the economy get this way? The inflation gets so high. And the rate should have been up in 2015, in my opinion, or 2016, because the recession was over. We can't be 10 years, 1 or 2 years to get in a recession and 10 years to get out of it. So what's your opinion on that?
Fair enough. I mean, the question between 2010 and 2020, look, and let me just caveat this by saying I'm not a monetary policy expert. I don't think many people are in this country. But
neither am I.
If we were in the sweet spot for inflation, then that's kind of how they've measured benchmark interest rates against the need to move one way or the other, is if we're inside that window, which we pretty much were for the extent of that decade. The question becomes the process regarding quantitative tightening and quantitative easing and the time with the Bank of Canada put them forward were grossly mistimed. But inflation that ran away from us in 2020, that became a runaway train globally. You know, we weren't alone there. Different countries took different approaches to pandemic supports and printing money and, business loans and the like. So we had a lot of things that happened at the same time. And I'm not giving Tiff Macklem a free pass because I think we're on the wrong track at this moment, to be honest with you. Like, he has said the quiet part out loud. The pain will be borne by the citizens. Right? Not by the politicians and not by Tiff Macklem. So the economy is going to suffer before they make a move here. If we're at 2.9%, I don't know if there's a rationale that we couldn't have seen the Bank of Canada reduce that by, 25 basis points or something. But here we are. And to try to put the genie back in the bottle is going to be pretty tricky marriage between monetary policy and fiscal policy.
Yes, exactly. And like I said, my parents were paying probably 10% interest on their mortgage back years ago. And they let it. The line was too flat for too long, and I know. And then COVID interrupted it all, but you can't use that excuse. Like I said, in my opinion, they dropped the ball way back in 2012, 2013, 2014, whatever you want to call it. If they had to have rates a little bit higher, and then COVID hit, they could have dropped the rates then, and maybe we wouldn't be where we are today. Because a lot of people were spoiled, in my opinion, with these constant low rates for 5 to 6, 7, 8 years.
And as a result, what has happened, not only the contributions to inflation, but our personal household debt load is out of control. I mean, it's plain and simple out of control. 100%. We were borrowing free money. For every dollar in, on the average, Canadians are spending $1.80 or $1.83 to service their debt. Talk about unsustainable.
Yes, and I don't know all the control of the Bank of Canada. Like I said, I'm not a super educated man, and I'm not up on all monetary policies, but the banks were giving out way too much money to people, and people are in debt. They're going to be in debt for a decade. It's going to take 10 or 15 years for us to recover from this. And people, hopefully is less, but that's just me taking a guess, right? But like you said, the banks are always making record profits. And like I said, I don't think the Bank of Canada was doing a good job for the last 20 years. So
fair enough.
They should be accountable and they should be criticised.
But the Bank of Canada is not the banks. Right? We have to separate those two as well, because if I meet the revenue debt ratio criteria, the bank's going to loan me the money because I'm a customer. They love that. They want to give me as much money as I can possibly handle. Why? Because of compound interest, right? It's the greatest revenue stream ever created in capitalist society. So the Bank of Canada and the Royal Bank are not the same thing. Just so people didn't conflate those two in their mind as we're talking about who's doing a good job or a bad job. Jason, last word to you.
No, that's it, Paddy. I appreciate your time. I know you're running out of time, so thanks for that. I appreciate it.
And thanks for taking up Amir's challenge.
Yes, I will. I think it's 7 to 2 for him now, so I got a bit of catching up to do.
You do so. Talk soon.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, good show today. Big thanks to all hands to support the program, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.